Hey, my name is Alex Andrews, and I write apps for my company, which is called 10 Kettles. One thing that I find that I run into relatively frequently is I've got a view like this with some subviews. I just want to be able to toggle the state. So I have a compact view like this and then an expanded view like this. Usually what I would do is I would set up a bunch of constraints and then I would toggle between two different groups of constraints. One group that lays it out like this and another group that lays it out like this. And that works and it's fine, but it gets a bit messy because you have so much logic in your view controller, and I think there might be a better way. So I want to demonstrate what I think is a better way right now. So first I'll show you the final project, and then I'm going to take you through it step by step from a blank project altogether. So here's our storyboard where we're going to get to. Basically, we set up a whole bunch of constraints for both of those different states, the expanded class like this, and then the compact one. But the big thing to know here is what we're going to do is we're going to actually set some of these constraints to be a NSLayout subclass called member constraint. This member constraint is really simple. It's just a very basic subclass with a group property, and then we extend an array that has member constraints to be able to kind of toggle on all the constraints in a group really, really easily. And just to show you how simple this is all the code in the entire project. So when I take you through this from scratch, we're going to be doing a lot of stuff in Interface Builder. But then in terms of code, you're going to copy and paste this, and then we'll write this simple toggling code, and that's it. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is create a single view application. So I'm going to call it constraint groups. And then we're going to go through a few different steps. The first thing we're going to do is set up this storyboard. And I don't want to bore you with all the repetitive work, so I'll just explain briefly what I'm going to be doing, and then I'm going to speed up the video so we can get through that part relatively quickly. So what I'm going to be doing is setting up a container UI view, and then a UI view to represent sort of like a photo, like we had here, like this. And then we have a title and a subtitle. So I'm just going to set that up like in the demo there. So there's our title, there's our subtitle. And I'm actually going to set it up in this expanded state to start. Okay. Now for each of these different views, I'm going to set a color, and then I'm also going to go over here and set the Xcode specific label, because that makes it a lot easier to read the constraints we're going to be adding. So let me do that now. Okay, so here is our initial views all kind of laid out roughly. The next thing we're going to do is take a look at these two states. There's certain common constraints. There's constraints that are going to be the same no matter which states it's in. So we can kind of see that the actual container doesn't move at all, right? So we're going to add in a constraint here, here, and here. And then we can also see that the photo, this distance doesn't change at all, and the distance between the title and subtitle doesn't change at all either. So let me go in and add in all those constraints now. And just a quick note that we're not going to be adding a bottom constraint because you can see the height of the container moves. So we want to let it be free to do that. We're also going to lay out the heights and widths of all the elements, because you can see that none of the heights and widths change at all, right? Okay, so there's the sizes of all the subviews. We've got the container laid out. Now we just need to lay out the constraint, basically the upper margin of this photo. And the vertical spacing between the title and the subtitle. 14 is fine. Okay, so that is all the common constraints that are going to be the same in both the states. So the next thing that we want to do is add in the constraints just for this particular state, the expanded state. So the first thing we're going to actually do is create that NSLayout subclass that we looked at earlier in the finished project. So we're going to call it member constraint, and I'm calling it member constraint because it's a member of a group. And then I'm just going to copy and paste this code. Now this code, if you're watching on YouTube, I guess, you can just go down to the video description. I've got a link to all this code. And if you're watching on the blog, then you should see it right below you. So that's all we need to do there. And then in our view controller, we can get rid of this if we want to. And then we're going to create an outlet collection. So just going to be IB outlet var. We're going to call it constraints. And it's just going to be an array of all of these toggleable constraints. Okay, fantastic. All right, so step 3, we're going to add in the constraints that just apply to this expanded view. So where those are going to be is, first of all, these 3 are all centered, right? These 3 are all centered. And then also you're going to see a constraint here and here. So let's add in all those. And because these are toggleable constraints, we are going to make sure to set the subclass to set the class as member constraint. So first, let's horizontally center all of them. Okay, and now we're going to add in the lower margin between the photo and the title. And then we're going to add in the 5th and final constraint for the expanded state, and that's going to be between the subtitle and the bottom of the container here. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now we just added 5 constraints. So what we need to do is make sure that we set the class of those so that we can toggle them later. So they're going to be all your center X constraints. Which one did we have here? We had the photo to the title constraint. So that's going to be this one. And then we had the bottom of the subtitle to the bottom of the container. There we go. So we just go over here and we set our class to be the member constraint. And that's pretty much it. Now we're going to do one more thing, and that's we're just going to bring all of these constraints into our view controller. So we can just pull up our view controller in the assistant editor. Going to make some more room here. Now, one kind of weird thing is if you hold down Control and you click from this constraint over, you can add this constraint into your outlet collection, which is great. But looking at it, it kind of looks like I'm adding all of them, but that's not the case. So we actually have to go through and add all 5 individually. Okay, and then if we click over here, we can see that those all added. All right, great. So now we can proceed to the next step, which is adding the constraints for the secondary state. So that's this one. So we don't need to do anything to the primary state. We just say, all right, what is unique about this layout? And we can see right away that we've got this pinning, and then these 2 here are aligned to the right side of the photo. The title and subtitle are aligned to the right side of the photo. And the last one is the title here and the photo here are aligned on their tops. So we're just going to add in all those right now, and it's going to be pretty much the same thing with just a minor exception. Okay, so we can move this stuff around. So let's start by moving it kind of where it's going to end up being in this state. And then let's set the right and bottom margins here. We'll align the top of the title to the top of the photo. We're going to align the left side of the title to the left side of the subtitle. using the leading. And the last thing is just to separate the title and subtitle from this photo. So we're going to set the horizontal spacing. And I'm just going to edit it because I think it's still a little close. Okay. So just like last time, we're now going to go through and we're going to find all those constraints and set them to be member constraints. Okay. And then we just change the class as we did before. And the other thing we're going to do a little bit differently here is this is a different group of constraints. This is our compact. So this and this, they should have separate constraint groups. So we go over and we actually change the group number from the default, which is actually 0, to 1. Now this means that we can then, in our code, just say, hey, set the constraints active state to 1, and then all of these will be automatically enabled. Now we're going to do one more thing. We're just going to change the priority to 999. And that makes them so that all these constraints we just added are ignored in Interface Builder, so we don't get all those errors, but it'll also work perfectly in code. By the way, just to automatically relay out everything, I use this shortcut a lot. It's Option Command /. Okay. So the last thing we need to do for all those constraints is drag them into our view controller so we can connect them to our big old Outlook connection or Outlet connection. So I'm going to do that now. So it's just all the 999 priorities, so it's pretty easy to pick out. Now, I mean, this step is a bit of a nuisance, but I think this is what we need to do anyways whenever you're accessing constraints in code. But the nice thing here is we're just dragging them all into the same bin. Okay, so here we are, and everything is hooked up. So all we're going to do now is create a little button, which we can use to toggle those two states. So let me just pin it on there. Okay, we'll call it toggle. And then now we're just going to go over here and create an action so that when we hit the toggle button, this is called, it's going to be toggle active group. Now, what this is going to do is it's just going to toggle the state variable. So here's a state variable. And it's going to toggle it. And then what we do is we just tell the constraints to activate the corresponding state. And that's literally it. So we can just press play and it's going to work. Cool. So let's just go over what we did one more time. So the first thing we did was we set up this storyboard. So we laid out all of our views. And then the second thing we did is we set up the common constraints. So the stuff that wasn't changing when we toggled the two different states. So for example, the top of this photo distance to the top of the container. So we set up the storyboard, we set up the common constraints, we set the member constraint subclass. This particular one I just clicked is actually part of the second group, and that's why it has a group setting of 1. And that was pretty much all that we did. The last thing was going into the view controller and creating this very simple state setup. So once again, I just want to show you the number of lines of code that's involved in this approach. You got this, which is copy and paste, and then here's your state management. And then your end result is this pretty cool effect. So anyways, I hope you found that useful. And if you have any questions or comments, just pop them in the comment section below. Once again, I'm Alex from 10 Kettles, and I hope you like this video.